Welcome to Court with Judy 5, where every week we dive into real, gripping courtroom drama. From shocking verdicts to unexpected twists, each case takes you closer to the truth. I'm your host, guiding you through every step of justice. We'll explore high-stakes decisions, personal struggles, and the power of law. Each story reminds us why justice matters. So, join me as we uncover the unforgettable moments in every case.
The courtroom was silent, except for the faint hum of the lights overhead. A camera panned across the audience, catching a dozen faces waiting to see whether justice would be quiet or explosive. In the middle of that anticipation sat a woman with thick eyeliner, a pearl necklace, and a box of tissues clutched dramatically in her hand. Her name was Karen Benton, 42 years old, the self-proclaimed queen of the Willow Park Homeowners Association. Every inch of her posture screamed entitlement. She had spent years bullying her neighbors with late fees and violation notices. Now, for the first time in her adult life, she was the one on trial. Across from her sat a quiet, trembling nurse named Maya Lopez, who looked more like someone attending a wake than a court hearing. But there was one thing that made this case unlike any other. The golden retriever sitting by the bench, Scout, had been a fixture in the courtroom for months. A calm, trained therapy dog, often present during tense cases. Most of the time, he slept through proceedings. But today was different. His eyes never left Karen Benton. The audience hadn't noticed it yet, but the dog's attention would soon turn the entire courtroom upside down. On paper, the case was simple. Maya Lopez had sued her HOA president for harassment and fraudulent fines. But once Karen began to speak, it became something much bigger. The transcript would later show that in less than 10 minutes, the world witnessed one of the most unconvincing performances of fake emotion ever seen, and that the dog, not a witness or lawyer, would be the one to expose it. "Miss Benton," the judge began, her voice sharp and precise. "You're accused of issuing over $9,000 in fines with no legal basis. Do you understand the claim?" Karen dabbed at her eyes before answering in a trembling, theatrical voice. "Yes, Your Honor. This is a misunderstanding. I never meant to hurt." "Mrs. What's her name again?" "Lopez," the judge snapped. "Yes." "Mrs. Lopez," Karen continued. "I was only doing my duty as president to protect our neighborhood. She broke several rules. I was simply enforcing them." Across the aisle, Maya gripped the edge of her folder. Inside were letters that had kept her up for months, fines so absurd they sounded like satire. A chalk drawing her children had made on the driveway. A wreath considered too bright. A recycling bin left out for 9 extra minutes. The harassment had been relentless, and the fines had escalated until Maya feared losing her home. The judge leaned forward. 9 extra minutes, Miss Benton. You fined her $300 for a recycling bin." Karen's lower lip quivered theatrically. "It's not about the bin, Your Honor. It's about standards. We have rules for a reason." Scout tilted his head. The judge noticed. "Rules for a reason." The judge repeated, tapping her pen. "Yet you issued 27 violation letters to this one woman in 18 months. Does that sound reasonable to you?" Karen sniffled and reached for another tissue. The crinkling sound was louder than her supposed sob. "I just wanted her to follow the rules. That's all I ever wanted. This whole situation is destroying my life." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Her performance carried a familiar falseness, the kind people put on when they know they're being watched. Maya looked down. Not out of pity, but disbelief. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Destroying your life. You collected $9,450 in fines. From this woman. You threatened to place a lien on her home, and now you claim you're the victim." Karen's tears seemed to come faster, too fast. Her makeup remained untouched, her voice steady. But her hands trembled just enough for the cameras to notice. It was an act refined over years. The same tactic she used in every HOA meeting. When challenged, "Mrs. Lopez," the judge said, turning toward Maya, "tell me in your own words what happened." Maya took a deep breath. "It started when my kids drew with chalk on our driveway. She fined us $500 for defacing community property. I tried to talk to her about it, but she ignored my letters. Then she fined us for our grass, said it was half an inch too long. I was working double shifts at the hospital, trying to keep up with bills. It just kept getting worse." Karen cut in sharply through her sobs. "She's lying, Your Honor. She's exaggerating everything." "The grass was Miss Benton. You will not interrupt," the judge snapped. The authority in her voice hit like thunder. "You had your chance to speak. You will sit there and listen." Karen shrank back, clutching her tissue again. Scout's gaze followed her every movement. Maya continued softly. "After a while, it felt like she was watching us. She drove past our house every day. Once, she left a letter taped to my door that said, 'Some people don't belong here.' My kids were home when they saw it." A quiet murmur spread through the courtroom. Even the camera operators glanced up. The judge's expression hardened. "Is that true, Miss Benton?" she asked. Karen pretended to wipe a tear. "That letter was taken out of context, Your Honor. I meant some people don't belong, ignoring community rules. I never meant it personally. I was under a lot of stress." Scout stood. No bark, no growl, just a slow, deliberate rise to his feet. He looked at Karen's trembling hand, sniffed the air, and took a cautious step toward her. The entire courtroom froze. The judge glanced from the dog to the defendant, her brow tightening slightly. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Scout's instincts were almost never wrong. Karen's tissue shook in her hand. Her eyes flickered toward the camera before dropping again. "Good boy," she muttered nervously, as if trying to charm him. But the dog didn't wag his tail. He sat perfectly still. His gaze fixed on her hand, the same hand holding the tissue she'd been using to dab her suspiciously dry eyes. The judge finally leaned forward. "Something wrong, Scout?" A few people in the audience chuckled softly, but the laughter faded almost instantly. Because in that moment, it was clear the dog had sensed something no one else had yet understood. Something that would turn fake tears into hard evidence and transform the case into one of the most shocking courtroom moments ever seen. For several tense seconds, no one moved. Scout's sudden alertness had filled the room with a heavy silence, the kind that settles in when everyone feels that something is about to be revealed, even if they don't yet know what it is. Judge Judy's eyes, sharp and calculating, shifted from the dog to the defendant. Karen Benton still clutched her tissue as if it were proof of innocence, but her confidence was beginning to crack. Her lower lip trembled, not with grief, but with something much closer to fear. "Miss Benton," the judge said evenly, her voice slicing through the silence, "why don't you set that tissue down on the table for a moment?" Karen blinked. "Excuse me? You heard me," the judge replied. "Set it down." Karen hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the cameras and then the spectators. Slowly, she placed the crumpled tissue on the table. Scout's nose twitched. He sniffed the air again, head tilting slightly, his attention locked onto the object. The golden retriever stepped forward cautiously, sniffed once more, then sat back down with a faint, almost dismissive exhale. The judge's gaze sharpened. "Interesting," she murmured. "He's never done that before." Karen forced a laugh, but it broke midway. "Dogs love me, Your Honor. He probably smells my perfume. It's floral. Expensive, expensive," the judge repeated dryly. "Just like the HOA lawyer you hired with the fines you collected from this woman." A ripple of laughter moved through the courtroom, and Karen flushed beneath her makeup. "That's irrelevant," she snapped. "I followed protocol." "Protocol." The judge raised an eyebrow. "We'll see about that." She opened a folder and flipped to the first page. "You claim Mrs. Lopez violated 27 community standards over 18 months. I have the list right here. Let's review a few." Her voice remained calm, but every word landed with precision. Number 7. Chalk drawings on the driveway. Number 9. Front porch light too bright. Number 15. Improper hose storage. She looked up. "Tell me, Miss Benton, what exactly is improper about a garden hose on someone's own property?" Karen's composure faltered. "It's unsightly. We maintain a certain standard in our neighborhood." "Unsightly," the judge echoed. "You live in Willow Park Estates, not the Taj Mahal. You fined this woman hundreds of dollars because her children played on their own driveway. And you expect this court to believe you were maintaining standards?" Karen's voice wavered. "It's not like that. She was difficult, Your Honor. She thought the rules didn't apply to her." Maya shifted slightly in her chair. "The rules apply to everyone," she said quietly, "but not the way you use them." A murmur spread through the courtroom. Even the bailiff's usual stoicism softened into a faint smile. Scout, now lying near the bench, rested his head on his paws, but kept his eyes open, watching. The judge leaned forward, resting her elbows. On the desk, "Miss Benton, I've been doing this for 35 years. I know the difference between someone who is truly remorseful and someone who is performing for an audience." She paused, letting the silence settle. "You want to know how I can tell?" Karen swallowed hard. "How?" Karen asked. "Because remorse doesn't need to be performed," the judge replied. "It shows up in actions, not theatrics. And right now, all I see are theatrics." Karen blinked rapidly and reached for another tissue, but stopped midway when she noticed Scout lift his head again. A hush fell over the courtroom as the dog's nose twitched. His attention suddenly locked onto her purse resting beside the table. Karen shifted uneasily. The judge noticed. "Is there something in your bag that's bothering him?" Karen tightened her grip on the strap. "No, Your Honor, just my things. Lip balm, perfume, tissues." "Why don't you open it for the court?" The tone was polite, but unmistakably firm. Karen froze. Her eyes darted toward the cameras. "Is that really necessary?" "I wouldn't ask if it weren't," the judge replied. "Open the bag." Karen's hands trembled as she unzipped her purse. One by one, she pulled out a wallet, a phone, a lipstick tube, and then paused. Scout sat up straight. In her hand was a small white stick with a metallic cap. She quickly tried to push it back into the bag. "Hold it right there," the judge ordered. "What is that?" Karen's voice faltered. It's just a menthol stick for my sinuses. I have allergies." A wave of whispers spread through the courtroom. The judge extended her hand. "Give it to the bailiff." Moments later, it rested on her desk. She unscrewed the cap, and a sharp scent of eucalyptus and camphor filled the air. The judge looked up slowly. "Miss Benton, this isn't for allergies. It's a tear stick. Actors use it to simulate crying." Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. The cameras zoomed in as her carefully constructed composure began to collapse. "Do you have any explanation," the judge asked calmly, "for bringing a theatrical tear stick into my courtroom?" Karen shook her head frantically. No, that's not what it is, Your Honor. I swear, my eyes were dry and I thought you could fool me." The judge's voice thundered. "Or fool this court. Or maybe you thought you could fool my dog." She leaned forward slightly, "'Cause let me assure you, Scout's nose doesn't lie." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Maya sat frozen, one hand covering her mouth, watching the woman who had tormented her begin to unravel. The judge leaned back, her gaze unwavering. Let the record show that the defendant's tears were chemically induced. This court will treat all emotional testimony as performance, because that's exactly what it was. Karen slumped in. Her seat, the tissue still in her hand, her mascara now streaking for real. For the first time, there was no act left, only fear, shame, and the lingering scent of menthol in the air. Silence filled the room so completely it felt suffocating. Karen stared at the tear stick on the desk as if it were a weapon pointed directly at her reputation. Her mind raced for an explanation, for anything that might save her from total humiliation. But there was no escape. The mask had fallen, and everyone in the room could finally see the truth. The judge tapped her pen once against the desk. You spent years using rules as a weapon, Miss Benton, harassing families, threatening people who couldn't fight back. And when confronted with the truth, you brought props to fake sympathy. That's not enforcement, the judge said firmly. That's manipulation. Karen opened her mouth, but her voice came out thin and unsteady. I didn't mean to deceive anyone. I just wanted people to take me seriously. Take you seriously. The judge's tone hardened. You fined this woman nearly $10,000 for chalk drawings and holiday wreaths. You stalked her home and sent threatening letters to her family. And now you expect me to believe you were enforcing community values? Karen's lips trembled. I was trying to protect the neighborhood. People move into our community because it's clean, respectable. I've worked hard to keep it that way. By terrorizing your neighbors? The judge shot back. By driving 17 families out in less than 5 years? That's your idea of respectable? Karen's eyes widened. How do you know about that? The judge opened another folder, because I did my homework. You think this court operates without background checks? My team spoke with former residents of Willow Park. We have emails, letters, even recorded voicemails of you threatening homeowners with liens if they didn't comply with your so-called donations. Sound familiar? The color drained from Karen's face. That was misunderstood. They were voluntary contributions. Voluntary? The judge's voice turned icy. When you tell someone their property might be seized if they don't pay, that's not voluntary. That's extortion. A louder murmur swept through the courtroom. Even the bailiff struggled to hide a reaction. Maya sat silently, her eyes glistening, not with revenge, but with relief. For the first time in years, she was being heard. The judge continued, her tone razor sharp. You thought hiding behind paperwork and fake tears would protect you? You thought you could weaponize procedure and emotion at the same time. But here's something you clearly never learned. Real emotion can't be bought in a pharmacy aisle. Karen's composure crumbled further. I just wanted order, she whispered. Nobody respects authority anymore. Authority isn't respect, Miss Benton, the judge replied. Authority is responsibility. And you failed it in every possible way. She lifted another document. This is the accounting record from your HOA's general fund. Over $8,000 transferred to an entity called Benton Community Consulting. That's your cousin's business. Correct? Karen's eyes darted nervously. It's a legitimate service. He helps manage finances. Except there's no record of any actual service performed. The judge cut in. You funneled HOA money to family members. That's embezzlement, plain and simple. A gasp rippled through the room. Karen's shoulders tightened under the weight of it all. I didn't steal. I was reimbursing expenses, meetings, office supplies. Miss Benton, the judge interrupted sharply. I've heard every excuse in the book. You've been running a private dictatorship under the name of community management. And when the consequences finally caught up with you, you tried to cry your way out of them. Scout lifted his head again, as if punctuating the moment. A light ripple of laughter spread through the courtroom, and even the judge allowed herself the faintest smirk. Even he doesn't believe you. Karen lowered her head. I don't know what you want from me, Your Honor. I want honesty, the judge replied. For once in your life, she leaned forward. So let's try this. Again, why did you really target Mrs. Lopez? Karen hesitated. Her breathing quickened. She questioned me, she finally admitted. At a board meeting 2 years ago, she accused me of favoritism. I was embarrassed in front of everyone, Karen admitted quietly. So this was personal, the judge said, leaning forward. You turned an entire association into your personal revenge tool because someone bruised your ego. Karen said nothing. The silence answered for her. The judge's voice softened slightly. That's the difference between people like you and people like Mrs. Lopez. She works long hours helping others. You sit in a comfortable chair policing door wreaths. One of you builds communities. The other tears them down. Karen's lip trembled again, but there were no tears left to fake, only humiliation. The judge turned to Maya. Mrs. Lopez, what do you want from this court today? Maya hesitated. I just want it to stop. I want her to leave people alone. No one should live in fear of their own neighborhood. The judge nodded. That's reasonable. And it's exactly what's going to happen. She faced Karen again. Miss Benton, I've seen arrogance before. I've seen entitlement. But rarely have I seen someone abuse power and then pretend to cry about it. You've managed to insult both justice and decency in a single case. Karen's shoulders shook. Her voice was hoarse. Please, Your Honor, this has gone too far. I didn't mean for things to get this bad. I can fix it. Fix it, the judge repeated coldly. You had years to fix it. Instead, you destroyed lives and collected fines like trophies. The only thing being fixed today is your own situation. For a moment, the courtroom went still. Again, Scout shifted slightly, resting his chin on his paws, as if signaling the end of the performance. Cameras zoomed in on Karen's face, once confident, now hollowed out by reality. The judge continued, her voice steady and final. You can fake tears, Miss Benton, but you can't fake truth. And today, truth just walked all over you on 4 paws. The words hung in the air long after she stopped speaking. Karen blinked rapidly, her breathing shallow, glancing toward the exit as if escape were still possible, but there was none. The story had already grown beyond her. The judge flipped another page in her file. Now that we've established your emotional testimony was fabricated, let's address the financial reality. She turned to the bailiff. Please confirm the totals. Yes, Your Honor, he replied. The defendant imposed $9,450 in fines on Mrs. Lopez, plus $3,200 in compliance fees directed to a company linked to her cousin. The judge's eyes locked on Karen. Do you have receipts for any of it? Karen hesitated. Some of it went to maintenance. Landscaping. Security? Then you won't mind producing invoices, the judge said, evenly. Silence. None. Came. The judge leaned back slightly. That's what I thought, because it doesn't exist. Her voice sharpened again. You weren't maintaining a neighborhood. You were maintaining control. You ran that HOA like your personal theft operation. And when someone questioned your authority, you punished them until they broke, the judge said. Karen looked down. I thought I was doing the right thing, she whispered. The right thing? The judge repeated sharply. You thought? The right thing was humiliating a nurse working 12-hour shifts caring for sick people. All because she asked for fairness. You thought the right thing was driving families out of their homes? A murmur spread through the courtroom. Shook their heads. Others watched in stunned silence as the judge's words landed like blows no gavel could match. Maya Lopez sat quietly, eyes fixed on the judge. The relief she felt wasn't anger, it was release. For months, she had imagined this moment, but never expected it to feel so final, so absolute. Even Scout seemed calmer now, lying back down, as if his role in the moment had ended. The judge reviewed the documents once more. "Mrs. Lopez," she said, "you are awarded full reimbursement of all fines paid, $19,450, plus an additional $10,000 in damages for emotional distress and harassment." Karen's head snapped up. $10,000. That's outrageous. What's outrageous? The judge replied, is how you treated human beings like pieces on a chessboard in your game of control. Consider this your first real lesson in accountability. Karen's voice cracked. "Please, Your Honor, I can't afford that." "You should have thought of that before terrorizing your neighbors," the judge said coldly. "Actions have consequences." Karen gripped the table, knuckles white. "You're ruining my life." The judge didn't hesitate. "No, Miss Benton. You did that yourself." The courtroom erupted into applause, an unusual breach of order, but one the judge did not stop. Even the bailiff allowed a faint smile. Scout lifted his head and wagged his tail slightly, as if confirming that justice had finally settled. Maya covered her mouth, tears of relief quietly streaming down her face. This time, real. The judge waited for the room to settle. Then she addressed everyone. "Let this be a lesson. Rules exist to create order, not oppression. When power is abused, it stops being leadership. It becomes tyranny. And tyranny, no matter how small, always collapses under the weight of truth." She turned to Scout and gently patted his head. "Good boy." The cameras captured the moment, the image that would soon spread everywhere. Then the gavel struck. "Case closed," she added. One final line, calm but cutting. "And Miss Benton, if you ever feel the need to perform again, take it to a theater, not a courtroom." A few nervous laughs broke the tension. Karen didn't laugh. She sat frozen, blinking as real tears finally replaced the performance she had relied on for so long. When she stood to leave, every trace of authority was gone. Her posture collapsed under the weight of what had just happened. Her carefully constructed image unraveling in front of everyone. Outside the courtroom doors, cameras were already waiting. Reporters swarmed, shouting questions about the tear stick, the dog, and what it felt like to be publicly exposed. Karen kept her head down and pushed through the crowd, but there was nowhere to hide. The footage was already spreading. Millions were watching, sharing, replaying, not because she cried, but because of why she had cried. By the next morning, every major platform had picked up the clip. #ScoutKnows began trending across social media. Memes exploded online. Screenshots of Scouts staring at Karen's hand labeled "Lie detector, 100% accuracy and menthol tears detected." Late-night hosts replayed the footage with commentary. Talk shows debated how a golden retriever had done what lawyers often couldn't, exposed dishonesty in real time on national television. But one moment stood above all others, a still frame of Judge Judy looking at Scout with quiet pride as the courtroom erupted behind them. It wasn't just justice, it was poetic justice, and it reminded millions that truth has a way of revealing itself, even when someone tries to hide behind tears. Months passed, but the moment never faded. The viral clip became more than entertainment. It became a symbol. Some called it the Scout effect. Across the country, HOAs began facing new scrutiny. Boards that once ruled through fear were now met with questions, audits, and demands for transparency. For Maya Lopez, life finally settled into peace. Her neighbors rallied around her, even organizing a small celebration. They gifted her a sign that read, Kindness is the only rule. Her children drew on the driveway again. Laughter returned to the street. Karen Benton, however, disappeared from public life. The humiliation followed her everywhere. Her name became shorthand for hypocrisy. Attempts to relocate were quietly rejected by other HOAs. Even her cousin's consulting company was investigated and shut down. Everything built on intimidation eventually collapsed under its own weight. Judge Judy never publicly revisited the case, but when asked about Scout in a later interview, she gave a faint smile. "Justice doesn't always come from a gavel," she said. "Sometimes it comes from instinct." That quote went viral too, a final reminder that truth doesn't stay hidden forever. The legacy of the case lingered in a simple lesson. Real emotion doesn't need props. And power without compassion always exposes itself in the end. In the final image of the rerun, Scout sat calmly beside the bench as Judge Judy's voice carried over the closing moment, the internet's final verdict already made. "Some lies are clever," it seemed to say, "but honesty has the better nose."